Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Matt Agnew, and I am with Blueprint Software Systems. Today, I am joined by another Matt. We'd like to make it easy for you guys here when you're listening to Blueprint content. So, hi, Matt. How are you?
Pleasure. I'm doing quite well, Matt. How about yourself?
Good, good. So Matt is our director of solution engineering, and he brings a really unique perspective to these type of events in that Matt speaks to many people that are struggling and doing well and looking to improve really anything you can think of when it comes to automation and process improvement. So what we're going to be doing today is Matt is going to be showing you at the end here is going to be showing you how Blueprint can help with hyperautomation. Before we get started, we're going to spend a few minutes here and really talk about what hyperautomation is and why it matters. So a quick recap. We're with Blueprint, so we're a software system designed to help you understand and improve your processes at a high level. And what we're going to do today is show you from our experience how we can do that, and then show you firsthand how Blueprint is designed to do that from a software standpoint. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what hyperautomation is, what the problem hyperautomation is solving, and really the difference between hyperautomation and process improvement, and all that before Matt shows us how we can consolidate our process automation strategy with Blueprint. So before we really get into it here, I have a kind of a pop quiz for everybody. So when we think about automation, hyperautomation, process improvement, we often really think of automation in general. So I'll even ask you this, Matt, what are some of the main things? This is a multiple choice, so I'll bring up the answers in a second, but from what you see with clients, what are some of the goals and reasons people are automating in the first place?
A lot of it comes down to just trying to make, the organization more efficient and more effective. And realizing that, especially now with all the turmoil and changes that organizations have gone through over the last couple of years, realizing that the power of your people is a very valuable resource, and you don't want to waste it on tedious tasks. So it's really how do we try to get more out of every day and really get people doing high value work as opposed to having them do, claims processing and detailed form filling for 90% of their day.
That's a really good point. You always hear that it's not really about, are you going to do automation? It's when and how much you're going to do, right? Because it's one of those things that you need to do at some level to keep up, because it's here and it does help you. So here are a couple of things here. So again, just think about this as you're looking at it. So I have four options here. So we think of it, and I think, Matt, you almost talked about all of these, but we think of primary goals of automation. Think of, is either improve efficiency, complete your tasks faster, save money, or improve the employee experience. So think about that. And I have one more question for everybody here. So if we look at three common business goals here of improving efficiency, completing tasks faster, or eliminating waste, what business discipline fits in the sweet spot? So take a few seconds and think about that. What fits in the middle there? And I'll give you a hint. It's not automation. So let's take a look at our answers here. So the primary goal of automation, and again, this is subjective. There's really any of these answers could be correct, but this is based on our experience and what we see. And really, if you think about what Matt said, it really is all about improving efficiency, right? It's about, and with improving efficiency, that really covers the entire gambit and is really the primary reason we want to automate our process in the first place. We want to do what we're doing right now better and faster, right? Smarter. And then when we go back to those bubbles that we had in there and thinking about the sweet spot, it's not automation, it's business process management. I'm going to talk about that in a second, in a little bit more detail. So before we move into that a little bit more, this is a really important thing to think of. And when we say this sentence, this is really important and a really critical part of your process improvement strategy is that automation is a downstream benefit. Process improvement is key. Process improvement and process analysis. One of the things that we hear from a lot of our prospects and clients is that when it comes to automation and RPA, they often would dive right in. They heard about RPA, thought it was great, hired some RPA resources, threw them at a problem, and they automated a lot of bots. And then what happens is that we end up having a lot of problems. So Matt, not to really just throw you on the spot, but with that concept, what are some problems that you've seen from people maybe automating too quickly?
Yeah, a lot of it is just trying to jump in and use automation technology just for the sake of automating,
Hmm.
not realizing that some things are better to be automated than others. There are certain ways to evaluate the right types of processes to automate. And also, there is really this idea of making sure that the time you invest in an automation is giving you a positive return on that investment. A lot of organizations build out a lot of automations and end up having to, try to maintain them and keep them up and keep them working, and they end up sinking more cost into it than they get return from that cost and investment. So those are some of the first key things that come to mind.
Absolutely. And I always like to say is, by taking a step back and looking at process improvement, you can really pave the way forward to realize those benefits that you want. So you should be you think at the end, what is it we want? And then start with process improvement. And then it's very likely that automation might be one of the things that you get in the middle to get you there, but you really need to look at analyzing and improving those processes first. So, with that said, today we did want to talk about hyperautomation. And when we say hyperautomation, we often hear many different things. So, just that we're all on the same page, let's quickly review a common concept and definition of hyperautomation, as there's a lot of different definitions that are floating around out there. So, the most commonly held belief or definition of hyperautomation is automating as many processes and more complex business processes as possible while implementing a tool chain to accelerate candidate discovery to automation delivery. So, a lot of fancy words there, but really it's your overarching strategy to automating quickly and effectively. So, that's really why people get excited when they hear about hyper automation, because it's the idea, this automation concept that everybody wants to do, and then it's combining multiple different disciplines to automate as quickly as possible. And again, why that's really important and why hyperautomation is a really popular and growing strategy, we do want to start with process improvement. When you start with process improvement, you can end with better efficiency. So let's talk about why this is important again to start with process improvement. So by gaining this better view and this better understanding of all of your processes, it really makes it much easier to move forward and make those right changes. So one thing that Matt is going to focus on in his demo in just a minute is the idea of a consolidated view. So this is the idea of taking your processes from multiple different points around your business and putting them all in one spot. This allows you to have a holistic view of everything that's going on. And this can help you find redundant processes, overly expensive processes, processes that are costing you way too much money in maintenance when compared to your other processes. So it's really important that we don't think of our processes just as individual items, is that we think of them as an entire landscape and analyze that first. So, and we mentioned when we're doing this, we want to look for a few things. And one of the things we're looking for is bottlenecks or waste, right? So in individual processes, things that are stopping a process from being successful, or things that really are off task, that really aren't the right process for you. Another big thing that we can do is when we start with process improvement is when we have a good strategy for improving our processes, we have the ability to create newer processes better. So you can reuse existing process elements when creating a new one. And of course, collaboration, right? So your entire company, everyone that's involved in your process can work on it together. And Matt is going to show us how we can do that in just a minute. So I have one more slide for you, and then I'll turn over to the fun stuff here. So a nice interactive demo from Matt Dodson. So this is a quick overview of Blueprint. So Blueprint's software platform for process improvement. And the general concept of how it works is that you take what you're doing now. So you take your processes, whether they exist from an RPA platform, process mining, task mining, even if it's a doodle, right? You take your process, how it lives now, and you import it into Blueprint. And from there, you can analyze and assess the value that that process is giving, and not just an individual process, but all of your processes as a whole. And why this is really great is because this allows you to take action in a really smart way. And what we typically see from an improvement strategy is that it often falls under one of these four buckets: modernize, optimize, standardize, or automate. And with modernize, we're talking about a few different things. What we see most frequently is where someone wants to move from one automation platform to another, which can be a complicated task. So that can just be one benefit from that comes downstream after you analyze your processes. So going from there, we always want to be able to optimize and improve our process. And then standardization is really what it's all about. Having that same process for your processes across your entire organization. So with that said, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to Matt here, and Matt is going to show us how this can work in Blueprints. Just give me 1 second here, and I will turn this over to Matt. So go ahead, Matt. I believe you can share your screen now.
I believe I can as well. Hopefully everyone can see that okay.
All good.
Excellent. So I'm going to take you through an example of one of these types of improvement strategies. But before I start, I really want to give you a sense of, the Blueprint platform is a web-based solution. It's a cloud-hosted platform, and it's there to help organizations understand and analyze their processes so they can determine what's the best improvement strategy as they move forward. And really it's about how do we save and drive that efficiency more readily and more consistently across the org. So here I have a Blueprint workspace. I have this Explorer over here on the left-hand side where we're actually going to take a set of processes, ones that actually in this case are already automated with one automation platform. We're going to look at them. And then we have this middle area where we're going to look at some details around those particular processes. And we even have some more details over on the right-hand side in terms of our utility panel. But in this case here, we're going to take an existing process. Actually, let me show you what I'm referring to. I have this process that exists as an automation, in Automation Anywhere, and it exists in production. It's running. And this particular automation or automated process is used to help generate reports based on Excel data. If you really dig in, you really know Automation Anywhere. This would probably be like a medium complexity automation. It's probably 500 or so lines of code. And so this is an automation, an automated process that already exists. And the first step we want to do is we want to bring it into Blueprint so we can analyze it. And as Matthew Agnew pointed out, we want to be able to pull in processes from many places. Here we're going to pull one in from an automation that already exists, but maybe we want to pull in processes from discovery solutions or processes we've captured with Visio from a variety of places. So what I'm going to do here is actually grab the file for that particular process. Let me go to my particulars. Oh, this one here. Grab that and pull it in. And for those who maybe know the technology, this is essentially the ATMX files of that automated process from Automation Anywhere, all zipped up. And so in this case here, I'm bringing in one process. But we have customers today that are bringing in an entire suite of processes, all of their processes that they may have automated or that may be existing in production. Now, what happens when we pull in process into Blueprint to help analyze this is we turn them into something that we call digital blueprints. And these digital blueprints are exactly what they sound like. They are a digital blueprint, a digital way to break down, decompose, and understand that process, not just at the level of an entire file, but really getting into the granularity and the details of every single step and every single action that's taking place. So if I refresh this here, here is the process that we pulled in. Now, in this case here, this particular process is spread across 3 different individual processes or tasks in the Automation Anywhere world, so it has a lot of detail to it. But before we go and look at the detailed process steps, let's take a step back and really analyze and understand this particular process, this automated process, before we decide what we want to do with it. So in this case here, what that means is we're going to go to our dashboard. Oh, we're going to let that load up. Actually, let's do this. Let's grab the right space that we should be looking at. Let's go here and go to our, oh, my mistake. Let's go to the right area. We got to go to our repository here. So this particular process, I'm just running a report off of this particular workspace, tells me that, hey, for this one automated process, it has 3 different parts to it, which we can see there. But we can start to see a lot of the details involved in this. This has 550 elements. There's a lot of different steps, lines of code, and even particular variables that are used. So it's actually broken down all the unique parts of that particular process. It's even ranked these different parts of this process by their complexity. Now, Based on this, we can actually provide some insight and analysis based on the scoring. This is a scoring that Blueprint does with its proprietary algorithm. So when it actually ingests these automation, it tells you how big these processes are in terms of size. So you know which ones you may need to refactor, retire, or rework, or even reuse. And similarly, from a complexity standpoint, it can tell you which ones are most complex. And these all point to how do we better improve this process? How do we better manage this process? How can we ensure that it's going to keep delivering that high ROI that we expect out of all our processes that we're running in production, for example? Now, in this case here, what we are going to do with this particular process is we actually want to modernize it. We've brought this in, we've run a quick analysis because we want to modernize and move this particular process from Automation Anywhere over to Microsoft's Power Automate desktop platform. Now, before we do that, we can actually use this blueprint analysis to do an assessment of, hey, how well does this map? How well is this automated process covered by a different technology? So in this case, we can actually get a scoring and a rating here of 97% coverage. This tells us that we have a very good coverage in that mapping, and these digital blueprints are actually going to help us do that mapping and conversion. So this one example, we wanted to start this way and really show you guys that regardless of what improvement strategy you want to take, whether it's through modernization, whether it's through standardization, optimization, or even just building automation, it all starts with an understanding and analysis. And these digital blueprints in the Blueprint platform are what power that analysis, because it helps you take these processes and really dig into them. So with that understood, let's take this existing process we have here, and let's actually jump to what it looks like. And this is actually what the digital blueprint looks like today. And just to give you guys a little bit more of an understanding, every single step in this digital blueprint, in this process, if you will, is broken down and actually understood by something that we call our common object model. This is actually a native generic RPA language that we built out in Blueprint that is mapped to all the different RPA technologies out there. And so as we bring in processes that already exist, especially in the RPA world, we can easily understand them because we've done all this mapping. And this mapping also helps us not only understand them and analyze them, but it helps us do things like drive a modernization effort where we want to re-platform this particular automation to another place. Now, with that understood, the actual re-platforming effort is very simple. We take this digital blueprint and we actually export it directly over to Power Automate Desktop. That is going to grab that entire process, all of the different flows and subtasks that are being called. It's going to package it all up, and it's going to convert it from the original Automation Anywhere code and structure into a different technology, in this case, Microsoft's Power Automate Desktop, converting all the different commands and lines of code into the detailed steps, lines of codes, and commands that are required in the world of Power Automate Desktop. Now, while it's sending that over, let me actually pull this up in Microsoft's Power Automate Desktop. And so here is the actual converted automation. And I won't go through every detail here because some of you may be familiar with it, some of you won't. This is what an automation looks like in Power Automate Desktop. This is the direct output from that digital blueprint that we analyze in the Blueprint world. So we wanted to take that existing Automation Anywhere process, we wanted to modernize it to Power Automate Desktop, and in exporting it over, that modernization, that conversion is automatically done. All of the lines of code and command, even, for example, that one step we were looking at in the process flow is right here as this display message. But if, for any of the technical folks on the phone, all of the variables, all of the individual commands, all of the automation logic, the exception handling, all of the selectors, all of that is converted. And it's even we even provide a detailed report of the things that weren't able to convert because, for example, something like Power Automate Desktop may not have certain support for the types of calls that were being made in Automation Anywhere. So if you recall, we said there was a 97% mapping. That means there's 3% of things that weren't able to map. We give you a report of exactly where to find those 3% of steps and exactly what you need to do. And so this is a very quick example of really how Blueprint is driving a process improvement strategy. And process improvement, as we mentioned, can take the shape of many different improvement strategies and improvement options. Modernization is one. Optimization, where you just want to take processes, understand them, and figure out how best to improve them. Standardization, allowing you to reuse different parts of these processes across other areas of the organization. And lastly, even just automation, being able to bring in existing processes you have from Visio or process discovery tools, or even using Blueprint's native capture capabilities to gather and mine and understand existing manual processes, and then use these digital blueprints to build those automations. And then, as mentioned, integrate with all of the different technologies that you may be using to build those automations today. And so the last thing I'll close with is just to give you a sense of what we mean. So when we talk about process improvement and process repository, it starts with something as simple as importing existing automations, and it very quickly grows into an entire repository of the different processes you have across different technologies, across different sources, broken up by the different lines of business. And this becomes your consolidated process view for that for your organization. And this is what allows you to drive an improvement strategy for each organization, each process as you see fit. And I'll pass it back to you, Matthew. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I was muted. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. So, there's a couple of quick questions I have for you that I know are common things that we get a lot here. And one of those is when, the example you showed, you're talking about moving your processes from one RPA platform to another. So a few different questions on that one. One is, from your experience or what you've seen clients do, how much time do people typically save using Blueprint versus migrating something manually?
That's a great question. So the option, I mean, if you have an improvement strategy that you're trying to implement in your organization where you're trying to move automations, a lot of people call this, hey, we want to migrate these automations. Unfortunately, that is basically a redevelopment effort. You have to rebuild the entire automation from scratch. So that one automation we showed you, just to give everyone some context, that 500 lines of code, that would take about 4 to 5 weeks for you to build by hand. And that's causing you have to rebuild everything, you have to retest it, you have to redeploy it. With Blueprint, what you're looking at is less than a week. You can get that automation picked, analyzed, moved over, tested, and deployed. And this is the significant lift that organizations have really been leveraging Blueprint for today, is really how do we drive an improvement strategy? How do we modernize or replatform our automations in a meaningful way? And how can we plan them and schedule them and prioritize them so that we can all do it consistently and not be stuck with this burden of we need to have a resource who knows both Automation Anywhere and Microsoft Power Automate Desktop to really read and then rewrite it.
Great, that makes sense. And continuing to talk about migration, so it sounds a bit like a project. You're moving from one place to another. What are some benefits that you've seen for kind of continuing to use those digital blueprints moving on?
Yeah, they become a system of record. So in a lot of places, the challenge with process, especially automated processes, is that once they're live and they're out there, you don't really have a system of record to refer to when you're trying to manage them and change them. You're having to have developers go into the code and tell you, well, if we make changes, these are the things I can see. Those digital blueprints can be queried, they can be searched. You can go in there and say, if I change the browser, how many different steps are going to be impacted or affected? And you can really start to scope and size these different change requests. And it becomes this repository that you can use to manage those automations and manage those processes. And also you can then use that library of process and reuse it as a way to standardize and start to bring on new streams of the business and leverage things you've already built out. So it starts to pay dividends very quickly because you've really started to centralize the tribal knowledge that lives in these processes today.
Great. And another two-part question I have for you, again, a common one we get. So, we talk to a lot of different people, process engineers, people at various business departments, people at center of excellences. So, who do you typically see using products like Blueprint are really being tasked with these type of projects the most? Like who in an organization is kind of most responsible for process improvement?
Yeah, so it usually falls to either a process center of excellence, an automation center of excellence is a common place. So we're seeing, these two disciplines sometimes be merged together into kind of an enterprise intelligent process automation discipline, and sometimes those process or automation center of excellences or disciplines can be spread out over across business units and lines of business. But these are commonly, process analysts, business analysts, um, people who are running operations. The nice thing is these digital blueprints really become a system of record, not just for the technical user, but also for the business user, where business users can now come in and actually either start recording or gathering new process or ingest their new process and really provide it as a starting point for these improvement strategies. But it definitely falls into the process improvement space of center of excellences, automation COEs, and even the business analysis and system analysis or process analysis roles that live within the business or IT spaces.
Great. And something you said there triggered the second part of that question. Whereas, you mentioned business users, IT, security, lots of different people. So can you just talk for a minute or two about kind of how Blueprint can accommodate all those people? Do we have to pay per user? Are there different privileges? Kind of, it sounds like a lot of people could be using Blueprint all at once. It sounds like it could get complicated. So maybe you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so when it comes to how Blueprint is made available to customers, how Blueprint is consumed by our customers today, Blueprint is not a user-based platform in the terms of you're not paying user-based licensing. Everything revolves around these digital blueprints. So the platform is made available to everyone within the organization. And as we start to collect, as you start to consolidate your process with these digital blueprints, that's where things are licensed. They're either licensed by the processes you're analyzing, the processes you're improving, the processes you're trying to build automations around. And so it allows you to create one central piece of information that everyone can come and use, whether it's to review and provide feedback on, whether it's to collaborate around, whether it's to provide, context and detail and to reuse. And even from an operations team, they can come here and reference how it's supposed to be behaving in production. But it all, again, centers around the idea of those digital blueprints and those processes as opposed to the users themselves.
Great, thank you. And I think, we covered a lot here, so I think we'll wrap it up. So Matt, thank you very much for sharing everything there. If anyone who's listening to this has any questions, please go to our website. You can reach out to us there, ask any questions you like. We'd be happy to get back to you, and keep an eye out for other events that we are at in the future. We're happy to always share our knowledge and answer your questions. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matthew.